Welcome back to St. Augustine's Confessions video series at Lit for Brains. We're on book 5. So, what is this book about as a whole? Well, in book 5, St. Augustine, we start with Faustus. Ooh, that's a thick marker. Check it out. It's a new marker that I got. And we end with Ambrose. These are the two main people that St. Augustine talks about in this chapter. So, as we know, St. Augustine is of the Manichaean sect. That means this spiritual religion based on the prophet Mani, and they believe that the universe is composed of light and dark forces. It's not all one there. It's a duality, two separate forces. And this guy right here, Faustus, is like the chief orator, the chief rhetorician, the one who is most eloquent and learned. And whenever St. Augustine expresses some kind of doubt about this Manichaeanism, all of his people tell him, you know what? When this guy comes into town, all of your doubts will be vanquished in midair, and they'll all just disappear. So Augustine is like, okay, I'll wait it out. And then the day finally comes when Augustine and Faustus meet. And you see that Augustine is disappointed. He's disappointed because this guy said he's read some Cicero, he's read some Seneca, he's read some great literature, and he's got some nice turns of phrase because of his reading, but he's not that impressive. He says everything that these guys say, the guys around me tell me, this guy just says it in a more eloquent way. And just because something is said eloquently does not mean it is true. Likewise, if something is said in a very bumbling way with no eloquence, very unkempt way of speech, that doesn't mean it's false either. Eloquence does not equal truth. So that's what he learns from Faustus. But one thing I want to mention, Augustine likes Faustus because when he asks him about different theories of the universe, Faustus admits that he doesn't know. He said, I don't know. He doesn't presume to know something that he doesn't. Who does this remind you of from Plato? Socrates. Only thing I know is that I know nothing. Remember Plato's Apology. Okay, so this is in Carthage. And by the time St. Augustine gets a little older, he's in his late 20s, he decides he wants to go to Rome, the big city. And of course he's influenced by, power, authority, being in the big city, as I mentioned. But he cites one reason as the students. The students were delinquent. They weren't passionate in Carthage. He's a teacher of rhetoric. He teaches Latin. So he goes to Rome, hoping to find better students, but he doesn't. He does not find better students in Rome. As a matter of fact, it was customary to pay tuition on the last day of class, and a lot of them skipped class on the last day. And Augustine was saying, I felt an increased passion and dislike of these people because they wronged me in particular. But I want to be godly. And a godly person doesn't just dislike wrong because it harms them. They dislike wrongness just for its own sake. And that's the ideal. So Augustine was a little bit bewildered at himself because he thought it was more wrong because he was personally harmed. Basically, it's very hard to relate to the wrongs of another sometimes when they're not harming you and you can just close your eyes and ignore who's being wronged. We do this a lot as human beings in the world. Now, I want to conclude this by talking about St. Ambrose. This guy is the light for St. Augustine. He was a father figure. St. Augustine went to, not Rome, but Milan. All these Carthage, Rome, Milan mixed up in my head. He went to Milan, and there he found St. Ambrose. And I want to really make an emphasis here. When he met St. Ambrose, St. Augustine knew about he was a Christian, a Catholic, and such an eloquent and learned man. Augustine was impressed by his kindness first and foremost, that he treated him like a kind father would treat his son. So Ambrose took Augustine under his wing, and Augustine for the first time felt at home because this was a learned man, and a learned man accepted Catholicism. Augustine was used to all the learned people being doubters, being atheistic, being secular, non-religious. But this was one of the first men that he met who had religious underpinnings to his thought. And that really impressed St. Augustine. So, it's time for the word of the day. And the word of the day is plenary authority. Plenary. This word means full, absolute. So if you have plenary authority, you're basically 100% dictator. You can remember this because plenary kind of sounds a bit like plenty. You got plenty of power, plenty of authority. As a matter of fact, you have full authority. Of course, who does have plenary authority in this entire universe? It's God. So, I will see you back here for book 6 of St. Augustine's Confessions. Take care.